This human baby brought the injured bear cub. The reason was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. The morning sun peeked through the trees, casting gentle shadows across the small wooden cabin that stood at the edge of the forest. Inside, little Emma Morgan, just 14 months old, sat on a colorful playmat, stacking wooden blocks that her father had carved for her. Her mother, Lily, hummed softly as she kneaded bread dough at the kitchen counter, occasionally glancing at Emma with a warm smile. Their home wasn't grand, just a modest cabin with a vegetable garden and a small chicken coop, but it was peaceful. The Morgans had moved here 3 years ago, seeking a simpler life away from the noise and rush of the city. They loved being close to nature, though they always respected the invisible boundary between their world and the wilderness. Emma's curious blue eyes wandered to the open window, where a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine and wildflowers. Her little ears perked up at the sound of something unusual, a high-pitched whimper that didn't belong to any of the familiar forest sounds she'd grown accustomed to hearing. She abandoned her blocks and crawled toward the window, pulling herself up to peer outside. Beyond the wooden fence that marked their property, movement caught Emma's attention. A small brown figure stumbled through the tall grass, crying out in pain with each step. It was a bear cub, no bigger than their neighbor's golden retriever. Its fur was matted, and it limped badly, favoring its right front paw. Emma watched, transfixed by the sight of the small creature. She didn't understand what it was exactly, but something about its cries tugged at her heart. She babbled softly as if trying to answer the cub's distress calls. Then came another sound, human voices, harsh and loud, punctuated by cruel laughter. 3 teenage boys emerged from the trees, following the cub's trail. They carried sticks and wore expressions that would have frightened Emma if she had been old enough to recognize the malice in their eyes. "Look at it limping," one of them called out. A tall boy with a red cap pulled low over his eyes smirked. "Bet I can make it cry louder." His friend, wearing a torn denim jacket, laughed and pushed him forward. "Go on then, Tyler, show us what you've got." The third boy, smaller than the others but just as eager, joined in. "Where's Mama Bear now? Not so tough without her, are you?" Emma watched as Tyler approached the frightened cub, raising his stick high. The cub cowered, trembling as it tried to back away. With a swift, vicious movement, Tyler swung the stick, striking the cub's injured paw. The small bear tumbled with a heart-wrenching cry that echoed across the clearing. Inside the cabin, Lily had stepped into the pantry, unaware of the scene unfolding just beyond their fence. Emma's face scrunched up at the sound of the cub's pain. Though she couldn't possibly understand the complexity of what was happening, something fundamental and pure within her recognized suffering. She let go of the windowsill and dropped back to the floor with a determination that only a toddler could muster. She crawled across the room to the partially open door that led to their wraparound porch. The door swung wider with her push, and she continued her journey, one hand after another, knees brushing against the wooden planks of the porch. The gate at the bottom of the porch steps had been left unlatched after Lily had gone out earlier to collect eggs. It swung gently in the breeze, opening just enough for a small child to pass through. Emma didn't hesitate. Something about the cub's cries pulled her forward, away from the safety of her home and into the wild unknown beyond. As she crossed the boundary between her world and the forest's edge, the cruel scene continued to unfold, with neither the teenagers nor the injured cub aware that they were about to be joined by the most unexpected participant. What would happen when a baby, pure of heart and intention, intervened in an act of senseless cruelty? The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting to find out. Emma crawled through the tall grass, her tiny hands pushing aside dandelions and clover. The soft earth felt cool beneath her palms, so different from the smooth wooden floors of her home. She moved with surprising speed for such a small child, driven by something she couldn't possibly understand, pure empathy. The teenagers were too engrossed in their cruel game to notice the approaching baby. The cub had managed to drag itself under a bush, its small body trembling with each labored breath. Tears matted the fur around its eyes, and a small trickle of blood stained its injured paw. Come out," taunted Tyler, poking his stick into the bush. "We're not done playing yet." The boy in the denim jacket, whose name was Ryan, laughed and kicked at the ground, sending dirt flying toward the bush. "Maybe we should smoke it out." The third boy, Jamie, looked around nervously. "We should hurry up. What if the mama bear comes back?" Tyler scoffed. "She's probably dead. That's why this little runt is all alone." "Or maybe she's hunting," Ryan suggested, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. "We should just leave it." "Don't be such a baby," Tyler sneered, reaching under the bush to grab at the cub. "I want to see if it can." His words cut off abruptly as he spotted movement in the grass nearby. At first, he thought it might be another animal, but as Emma crawled into the clearing, all three boys froze in disbelief. "What the?" Jamie whispered, eyes wide with shock. "Is that a baby?" Emma sat back on her diaper-padded bottom, staring up at the three towering figures with curious eyes. She showed no fear, only interest, as though they were simply new characters in her expanding world. Then her gaze shifted to the bush, where the cub's whimpers had quieted to soft, pained breaths. "How did a baby get out here?" Ryan asked, looking around frantically. "There must be parents nearby." Tyler lowered his stick, suddenly aware of how it might look, three teenage boys with weapons standing over a wounded animal, and now, inexplicably, a human baby. "We need to go," he said, his voice losing its earlier bravado. But Emma wasn't interested in the boys. She turned away from them and resumed her crawl toward the bush where the cub was hiding. The boys watched, paralyzed by confusion and the strange turn of events. Meanwhile, back at the cabin, Lily emerged from the pantry with a jar of honey. "Emma, sweetie, would you like some honey?" Her words died in her throat as she realized the playmat was empty. Her eyes darted to the open door, and panic surged through her body like electricity. "Emma," she screamed, rushing onto the porch. The sight of the unlatched gate sent her heart plummeting. She ran down the steps, calling her daughter's name with increasing desperation. Back in the clearing, Emma had reached the bush. The bear cub, sensing her approach, tried to retreat further but had nowhere to go. Its small, dark eyes, wet with pain and fear, watched the approaching human cub with wariness. Emma made a soft cooing sound, the same one she used when petting their neighbor's cat. She reached out a chubby hand toward the frightened cub, unaware of the potential danger. "Stop her," Jamie hissed, but none of the boys moved. They were transfixed by the surreal scene unfolding before them. The cub's fear was gradually being replaced by curiosity. This small human didn't carry the same threatening energy as the larger ones. There was no stick, no loud voices, no painful kicks, just soft sounds and a gentle approach. Just as Emma's fingers were about to touch the cub's fur, a much more terrifying sound erupted from the deeper woods, a roar that seemed to shake the very air around them. The mother bear had returned. She burst from the tree line like a freight train, all muscle and protective fury. Standing on her hind legs, she towered over the clearing at nearly 7 feet tall, her massive paws armed with claws that could disembowel a grown man with a single swipe. The teenagers screamed in terror. Tyler dropped his stick and stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet. Ryan and Jamie were already running, crashing through the underbrush without looking back. "The baby!" Jamie shouted over his shoulder, but fear had overtaken any sense of responsibility. They fled, leaving Emma sitting beside the bush, completely oblivious to the danger bearing down on her. Lily heard the commotion and the unmistakable sound of a bear's roar. Cold dread washed over her. She ran faster, her legs pumping with the superhuman strength that only a mother's fear can summon. But she was still too far away, separated from her baby by an expanse of open field that seemed endless. The mother bear dropped to all fours and charged toward her cub and the human baby sitting beside it. Her massive paws pounded the earth, closing the distance with frightening speed. Her eyes, usually warm brown, had turned nearly black with rage, focused solely on protecting her young. Emma, still unaware of the danger, had managed to touch the cub's ear. She giggled as she felt the soft fur, a sound of pure delight that carried across the clearing. The injured cub, surprisingly, didn't flinch away. Instead, it leaned slightly into her touch, perhaps recognizing another young being offering comfort rather than pain. The mother bear was just feet away now, her hot breath visible in the cool morning air. She opened her mouth, revealing teeth designed for tearing flesh, and let out another earth-shaking roar. But then something unexpected happened. As she reached her cub and the human baby, she suddenly pulled up short, skidding slightly in the soft earth. Her nostrils flared as she took in the scene before her, her injured cub leaning against a human child, who was gently patting its ear. Both of them now looked up at her with similar expressions of innocent curiosity. The forest fell silent. Even the birds seemed to hold their songs. The wind itself appeared to pause, waiting to see what would happen next. In the distance, Lily saw the massive bear looming over her baby. She screamed Emma's name, her voice cracking with despair as she pushed her body to move faster, knowing she was still too far away to intervene. But there was someone else much closer. An old man emerged from the trees on the opposite side of the clearing, moving with surprising agility for his apparent age. He wore camouflaged clothing and carried a rifle, but he didn't raise the weapon. Instead, he slowed his approach, his experienced eyes taking in the unusual tableau. The mother bear turned her head toward him, a low growl rumbling in her chest. The old man stopped, then slowly knelt down, placing his rifle on the ground beside him. "Easy now," he said in a voice as weathered as his sun-darkened skin. "Nobody needs to get hurt here." The bear's attention shifted back to her cub and the human baby. Emma, completely unafraid, smiled up at the massive creature and reached out a hand, the same way she'd reached for the cub. What happened next would later be described as miraculous by those who witnessed it. The mother bear lowered her massive head, bringing her face close to Emma's tiny hand. She sniffed carefully, her wet nose just inches from the baby's fingers. Emma giggled again, delighted by this new game. And then, to the astonishment of both the old man and Lily, who had finally reached the edge of the clearing, the bear gently, impossibly gently for such a powerful creature, nudged her nose against Emma's palm. It was as though some ancient understanding passed between them. Between the mother protecting her young and the innocent child who had shown kindness to a creature in pain. For just a moment, the divide between human and animal seemed to dissolve, revealing a deeper connection that existed long before borders and boundaries. The old man watched in awe, his weathered hands trembling slightly. In his 67 years living in these woods, he had never witnessed anything like this. As a forest ranger, Harold Mitchell had seen bears attack when threatened, had rescued hikers from dangerous encounters, and had even been forced to put down aggressive animals that posed risks to the community. But this defied everything he thought he knew about wild bears. "Don't move," he called softly to Lily, who stood frozen at the edge of the clearing, tears streaming down her face. Any sudden movement might break the spell. Lily nodded almost imperceptibly, her entire body rigid with fear and wonder. Her daughter, her baby, was touching a wild bear. And somehow, impossibly, she wasn't in danger. The mother bear slowly turned her attention back to her injured cub. With gentle movements that belied her massive size, she nudged her young one, examining the wounded paw. The cub whimpered but seemed less frightened now, taking comfort in its mother's presence. Emma, fascinated by this interaction, babbled happily and patted the mother bear's nose again. The bear tolerated this touch with remarkable patience, as though understanding that this small human meant no harm. Then something even more extraordinary happened. The mother bear carefully took her cub by the scruff of its neck and, instead of retreating into the forest as expected, placed it closer to Emma. It was as if she was entrusting her vulnerable offspring to this gentle human child, or perhaps seeking help. "I've never seen anything like it," Harold whispered, slowly reaching for his radio. "It's almost like she knows the baby is harmless, but more than that, like she's asking for help." The bear's intuition wasn't misplaced. Unknown to everyone present, Lily wasn't just a homesteader seeking a simpler life. Before moving to the cabin, she had been a veterinarian specializing in wildlife rehabilitation. She had left that career behind after Emma's birth, wanting to raise her daughter in nature rather than merely treating its casualties. As the mother bear backed away slightly, still watching intently, Harold saw his opportunity. With slow, deliberate movements, he approached Lily. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I'm Harold Mitchell, forest ranger. I need to know, do you have any experience with injured wildlife?" Lily's eyes widened in surprise. Yes. I was a wildlife vet before we moved here." "But how did you?" "I didn't," Harold said, a hint of wonder in his voice. "But that bear seems to have sensed something about your child, and by extension, about you. I've tracked this particular mother bear for years. She's always been exceptionally aggressive in protecting her cub. This behavior is unprecedented." Meanwhile, in the forest, the three teenagers had stopped running once they realized they weren't being pursued. They stood, catching their breath, the enormity of what they'd done and what they'd abandoned sinking in. "We left a baby back there," Jimia said, his voice hollow with shame. "With a bear." Ryan leaned against a tree, his face pale. "We have to go back. We have to tell someone." Tyler, however, was thinking of the consequences. "If we go back, we'll have to explain what we were doing to that cub. We'll be in huge trouble." "We're already in huge trouble," Jimia exploded. "A baby could die because of us." As they argued, they didn't notice the approach of another figure, a man in his early 30s with a worried expression and a walking stick. He had been hiking when he heard the commotion. "Excuse me," he called out, making all three boys jump. "I heard shouting. Is everything all right?" The boys exchanged glances, a silent negotiation taking place in seconds. Finally, Jimia stepped forward. "Sir, there's a baby back there," he said, pointing the way they had come. "And a mother bear with an injured cub." The man's expression changed from concern to alarm. A baby? Whose baby? Where are the parents? We don't know, Ryan admitted. The baby just crawled into the clearing where we were. He trailed off, unable to admit what they had been doing. Where you were what? The man pressed, already pulling out his phone, checking for signal. Where we were, hurting the cub, Tyler suddenly confessed, his voice barely audible. We were hurting the bear cub, and then this baby just appeared. And then the mother bear came, and we ran. The man stared at them in horror, but there was no time for moral judgments. Show me, he demanded. No. Back in the clearing, Lily had made a decision. With Harold's guidance, she was slowly approaching her daughter and the bears. Each step was measured, careful, her hands visible and her movements smooth. Emma, sweetie, she called softly. Mommy's coming to you. Stay still, baby. Emma looked up at her mother's voice, her face breaking into a delighted smile. She waved excitedly, then turned back to the bears as if to say, look what I found. The mother bear watched Lily's approach warily but made no aggressive moves. When Lily was just a few feet away, she slowly knelt down, making herself smaller, less threatening. I can help your baby, she said to the bear, knowing the animal couldn't understand her words but hoping her tone and intent would somehow communicate. I used to heal animals like your cub. As if in response, the mother bear backed up another step, creating space between herself and her cub, a space that Lily could enter. It was an extraordinary display of trust from a wild animal, one that defied explanation. With trembling hands, Lily moved forward and gently examined the cub's injured paw. Her trained eye quickly assessed the damage. It's not broken, she told Harold, who remained a cautious distance away. But there's a deep cut and possible tendon damage. I have supplies at home that could help, but... She trailed off, looking at the mother bear. Taking a wild animal's cub for treatment was dangerous under normal circumstances. With the mother present and aware, it seemed impossible. Yet the impossible had already happened multiple times that morning. Emma, still sitting beside the cub, reached out and touched her mother's hand, then the cub's injured paw, then her mother again, as if connecting them, showing her mother what needed to be fixed. I think, Harold said slowly, that she's giving you permission. I've never believed animals could reason like humans, but today... He shook his head in wonder. Just then, footsteps crashed through the underbrush, and the man who had encountered the teenagers burst into the clearing, followed by the three boys. He skidded to a halt at the sight before him, a woman and baby sitting with a bear cub, while the mother bear stood just feet away, watchful but calm. Don't move, the man shouted, reaching for something at his belt. The mother bear's head snapped toward the new threat, her calm demeanor instantly replaced by a protective stance. She rose onto her hind legs, a warning growl building in her throat. No. Lily cried out. Stay back. We have a connection here, don't break it. But the delicate trust that had been established was already crumbling. The mother bear dropped to all fours, positioning herself between the newcomers and her cub and, surprisingly, Emma as well, as if the human child had become part of what she was protecting. The man, who they would later learn was Daniel Foster, an off-duty police officer, assessed the situation rapidly. Unlike Harold, he saw only danger, a wild animal too close to humans, especially a defenseless child. Ma'am, he said urgently, get your baby and back away slowly. He instructed, his hand now clearly on a holstered gun. Please, Lily begged. She's not threatening us. She brought her cub to us for help. I'm a veterinarian, I can treat the injury. Daniel hesitated, his training at odds with the scene before him. The three teenagers hung back, shame written across their features as they realized the full consequences of their earlier cruelty. Harold stepped forward, placing himself between Daniel and the bears. "Officer," he said, recognizing the stance of law enforcement. "I'm Ranger Harold Mitchell. I've been tracking this bear family for years. What's happening here is extraordinary. If you draw that weapon, you'll destroy something miraculous, and potentially cause the very attack you're trying to prevent." The tension in the clearing was palpable. Emma, oblivious to the danger, continued to pat the cub gently, her innocent interaction a stark contrast to the adult conflict unfolding around her. Finally, Daniel slowly moved his hand away from his weapon. "Explain to me what's happening here," he said, his voice still tight with concern. As Harold quickly outlined the situation, Tyler stepped forward, his face streaked with tears. "It's our fault," he admitted, gesturing to himself and the other boys. "We found the cub alone and we hurt it. We were poking it with sticks and kicking it." His voice broke. "We thought it was funny. And then this baby just crawled up and started being nice to it, and then the mother bear came, and we ran away and left the baby there." Daniel's expression hardened at this confession, but before he could respond, something even more unexpected happened. The mother bear, seeming to sense that the immediate threat had passed, turned her attention back to her cub. With gentle movements, she began to nudge it toward Lily, as if renewing her request for help. "She wants me to take care of her baby," Lily whispered, awestruck. "She understands somehow." Emma clapped her hands delightedly, as though approving this development. She reached out to touch the mother bear's fur, and to everyone's amazement, the massive animal allowed it, even lowering her head to make it easier for the small human. "I need my medical kit," Lily said softly, not taking her eyes off the bears. "It's at the cabin. We need to decide quickly, either I treat the cub here, or—" She hesitated, considering the unprecedented possibility. "Or the mother bear might actually allow us to take the cub back to the cabin for proper treatment." Harold shook his head in disbelief. "In 30 years as a ranger, I've never even heard of such a thing. But then again, I've never seen anything like what's happening right now." Daniel, still tense but now intrigued, stepped closer to the teenagers. "You boys stay right where you are. We'll deal with your actions later." They nodded, thoroughly subdued by the gravity of the situation. "I'll go get your kit," Daniel offered to Lily. "Just tell me where to find it." As Lily gave him directions to the cabin and described where her veterinary supplies were kept, the mother bear continued her gentle interaction with Emma. The baby had now stood up on wobbly legs, using the bear's massive shoulder for support. She giggled as she felt the coarse fur beneath her tiny fingers. "She's petting the bear like it's a dog," Jimmy whispered, his voice tinged with awe and lingering shame. "The baby sees no difference between a pet and a wild animal," Harold explained quietly. "No preconceived notions, no learned fear. And somehow, the bear recognizes that innocence." After Daniel departed for the cabin, Lily turned her attention to the injured cub. Speaking in soothing tones, she explained what she was going to do, knowing the mother bear couldn't understand her words but might be calmed by her voice. "I'm just going to look at your baby's paw," she said. "I won't hurt him, I promise." With slow movements, she examined the wound more thoroughly. The cub whimpered but didn't pull away. The mother bear watched intently, her dark eyes never leaving Lily's hands. "The cut is deep," Lily reported to Harold. There's debris in the wound, looks like splinters, probably from the stick these boys were using. She shot a disappointed glance at the teenagers, who looked away in shame. Meanwhile, Emma had decided it was time for a game. She plopped down on her bottom and held out her hands, making the grabbing motion she used when she wanted to play peekaboo. The mother bear, remarkably, seemed to understand this was a friendly gesture. She nudged her nose against Emma's palms, making the baby squeal with delight. "This is unbelievable," Harold murmured, pulling out his phone to document the interaction. "No one would believe this without evidence." Ryan, the boy in the denim jacket, stepped forward hesitantly. "Ma'am, I know first aid. If you need an extra pair of hands when your kit arrives, I could help." Lily regarded him carefully. "Were you part of hurting this cub?" Ryan nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "Yes, ma'am. I didn't hit it, but I was there. I didn't stop it either." "Then helping fix what you damaged seems appropriate," Lily said firmly. "When the kit arrives, you'll assist me under my direction. Consider it the beginning of making amends." In that moment, something shifted in the clearing. The teenagers who had arrived as thoughtless aggressors were being offered a path to redemption. The wild bear, traditionally seen as a dangerous threat, was demonstrating trust and intelligence beyond what anyone thought possible. And at the center of it all was Emma, a baby too young to understand the barriers that supposedly existed between humans and wild animals. Daniel returned 15 minutes later, carrying Lily's comprehensive medical kit. He had also brought a small blanket, water, and some of Emma's toys, thinking practically about the child's needs. "I called it in," he told Harold quietly. "My superior didn't believe me, but he's sending another officer and animal control. They should be here in about an hour." Harold frowned. Animal control might escalate the situation. "This bear isn't behaving aggressively." "I explained that," Daniel assured him. "They're coming to observe and assist if needed, not to tranquilize unless things change." With her supplies now available, Lily prepared to treat the cub's wound. She laid out antiseptic, tweezers for removing debris, antibiotic ointment, and bandaging materials. Ryan knelt beside her, following her instructions to prepare the solutions. "Now comes the tricky part," Lily said. "Cleaning the wound will hurt, and the cub might cry out. If that happens..." She glanced at the mother bear, who was still engaged in what looked like a game with Emma. "If that happens, we need to be prepared for the mother to react." Harold finished, "Everyone stay calm and move slowly, no matter what happens." As Lily began cleaning the wound, the cub whimpered in pain. The mother bear's head snapped around, her eyes focusing intently on her offspring's distress. A low growl rumbled in her chest, and everyone tensed. But then, remarkably, Emma intervened. Perhaps sensing the change in atmosphere, she reached out and placed her small hand on the mother bear's muzzle, babbling softly in the way she did when trying to comfort her stuffed animal. The bear's growl subsided. She looked from Emma to her cub, then back to Emma, as if processing the connection between the human's touch and her cub's treatment. After a moment, she settled down, still watchful but allowing the procedure to continue. "She understands," Lily whispered, amazed. "She actually understands we're helping." Ryan worked alongside Lily, handing her supplies as needed and learning how to properly clean a wound. His earlier bravado had completely vanished, replaced by genuine concern and a desire to make things right. "There were stories in my grandmother's tribe," Harold said quietly as they worked, "tales about children who could speak with animals, Who bridged the gap between our world and theirs? I always thought they were just legends. The cleaning and bandaging took nearly 20 minutes. Throughout the process, Emma continued her gentle interaction with the mother bear, sometimes patting her, sometimes just sitting close by, occasionally offering the bear one of the toys Daniel had brought. As Lily finished securing the bandage, she sat back on her heels. That's the best I can do here. The wound is clean and protected. Now, the cub needs antibiotics to prevent infection, but those would need to be injected, and I don't have wildlife-appropriate doses with me. The mother bear seemed to sense that the procedure was complete. She moved closer, carefully inspecting her cub's newly bandaged paw. The cub tested it gingerly, putting slight weight on it before pulling back. He'll need to rest it, Lily explained, still speaking directly to the mother bear as if she could understand. Keep him from walking too much for a few days. What happened next left everyone speechless. The mother bear turned to face Lily directly, her massive head level with the kneeling woman's face. For a breathless moment, they looked into each other's eyes. Wild animal and human healer connected by a shared concern for a vulnerable life. Then, deliberately, the bear dipped her head once in what looked uncannily like a nod of acknowledgement. "Did you see that?" Tyler whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. She thanked her. The bear turned back to her cub, gently nosing it to its feet. The little one stood shakily, favoring its injured paw but clearly more comfortable than before. With tender movements, the mother guided her cub toward the forest edge. But before leaving, she paused. The massive bear turned once more, her gaze finding Emma, who was watching with wide, curious eyes. The bear made a soft huffing sound, almost like a sigh, then deliberately walked back to the baby. Time seemed to stand still as the wild bear lowered her head one final time, gently touching her nose to Emma's forehead in what could only be described as a gesture of affection or blessing. Emma giggled, reaching up to touch the bear's face one last time. Then, with a grace that belied her size, the mother bear turned away, guiding her cub into the shelter of the forest. They watched until the bears disappeared among the trees, the only evidence of their presence the flattened grass where they had stood and the extraordinary memory of what had transpired. For several minutes, no one spoke. The clearing was quiet except for Emma's contented babbling as she played with the toys Daniel had brought. Finally, Harold broke the silence. "I've lived in these woods my entire life," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've tracked bears, studied their habits, respected them as wild creatures. But today..." He shook his head, at a loss for words. "Today, we witnessed something that can't be explained by science or conventional wildlife behavior." Lily finished for him. She gathered Emma into her arms, holding her daughter close. "Today, we saw what happens when pure innocence meets the wild." Daniel looked at the three teenagers, who stood subdued and transformed by what they had witnessed. "You boys started this day by causing pain," he said gravely. "But you've been given a rare opportunity to see something miraculous, something that might change how you think about all living creatures." Tyler nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I'll never hurt an animal again," he vowed. "Never. What that baby did, how she wasn't afraid, how she just wanted to help, and then how the mother bear understood, it makes you wonder. Who were the truly wild ones today?" Harold said pointedly but without malice. "The bears, who showed compassion and understanding, or the humans, who inflicted pain for amusement?" The teenagers accepted this rebuke with bowed heads. Their punishment would come later, community service at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. Harold would make sure of that. But the true consequence of their actions had already manifested in their changed hearts. As they prepared to leave the clearing, Emma reached out toward the forest, making the same grabbing motion she had used with the bear. She babbled excitedly, a string of meaningless sounds to adult ears but carrying an unmistakable tone of farewell. "She's saying goodbye," Lily said, smiling through tears. "Somehow, my baby made friends with a wild bear today." In the distance, barely audible, came the low rumbling call of the mother bear, a sound that seemed to answer Emma's baby talk. A perfect response to an imperfect translation across the divide between human and wild. "There's so much we don't understand about the natural world," Harold said as they made their way back toward the cabin. "So much wisdom we've forgotten in our rush to separate ourselves from it." Lily looked down at her daughter, this ordinary baby who had done something extraordinary. "Perhaps the wisest among us are those who haven't yet learned to build walls between themselves and others, even when those others have fur and claws." Emma, nestled in her mother's arms, yawned and laid her head against Lily's shoulder, tired from her adventure. Her small hands still opened and closed as if feeling the memory of coarse bear fur beneath her fingers. Back at the cabin, after the others had gone, Daniel to file his report, Harold to meet the arriving officials, the teenagers to begin their journey of redemption, Lily sat on the porch with Emma on her lap. They looked out toward the forest edge, where the golden afternoon light filtered through the trees. "You did something amazing today, my sweet girl," Lily whispered, kissing the top of her daughter's head. "You showed us all what it means to see with your heart instead of your eyes." Emma pointed toward the trees and made a soft sound, halfway between a word and a bear's gentle huff. And deep in the forest, where a mother bear tended to her healing cub in a den lined with soft moss, that sound was answered, with a mother's love that transcended species and language, bound by the universal understanding that exists between all who care for the young and vulnerable. The story of the baby who befriended a bear would spread through the nearby town, then beyond. Most would dismiss it as exaggeration or myth, but those who were there that day would forever carry the truth of what they witnessed. A moment when the artificial boundaries between human and wild dissolved, revealing the simple compassion that connects all living things. A connection most visible through the eyes of a child too young to know that such connections should be impossible. 3 months passed. Summer gave way to autumn, painting the forest in rich hues of amber, crimson, and gold. Lily had continued her veterinary work, setting up a small practice on their property for local wildlife. Word had spread about her skills, and foresters, hikers, and concerned citizens would occasionally bring her injured animals: a fox with a broken leg, an owl with damaged wings, a raccoon caught in a trap. The 3 teenagers, Tyler, Ryan, and Jamie, had become regular visitors, fulfilling their community service hours by helping build enclosures, cleaning cages, and assisting with feeding and care. Their transformation had been remarkable. Tyler, once the cruelest of the 3, now showed a particular gentleness with the most frightened animals. Ryan had discovered an aptitude for record-keeping and wound treatment, while Jamie had become an enthusiastic educator, helping Lily develop materials for local schools about wildlife conservation. Harold, the forest ranger, stopped by weekly, partly to check on the growing rehabilitation center and partly to see Emma, who had developed a special bond with the weathered old man. He would bring her small gifts: a perfect pinecone, a beautiful feather, a smooth river stone, teaching her the names of the forest creatures and plants with inexhaustible patience. Emma had celebrated her 2nd birthday, and her vocabulary was expanding rapidly. She could now say simple words like a bear, help, and friend. the significance of which was not lost on those who had witnessed that extraordinary day in the clearing. The mother bear and her cub had not been seen again, at least not up close. Harold occasionally reported tracks or sightings deeper in the forest, noting with satisfaction that the cub appeared to be thriving, its gait normal, with no sign of the earlier injury. Life had settled into a pleasant rhythm, the events of that summer day fading into a cherished memory, until the first snow of winter. It came overnight, a silent blanket of white that transformed the landscape. Emma pressed her nose against the window, fascinated by the changed world outside. Lily was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when she heard her daughter's excited squeal. "Bear! Bear!" Lily's heart skipped a beat. She rushed to the window, expecting to see Emma's stuffed teddy that Daniel had given her as a birthday present. Instead, she froze at the sight that greeted her. At the edge of their property, partially obscured by falling snow, stood the unmistakable silhouette of a large bear. Even from this distance, Lily recognized her, the distinctive scar across her muzzle, the slight tilt of her head as she surveyed the cabin. "It's her," Lily whispered, instinctively pulling Emma closer. After all this time. But there was something different. Something wrong. The bear moved with a labored gait, listing slightly to one side. Even through the falling snow, Lily could see the dark stain on the bear's flank, blood stark against the white background. "She's hurt," Lily realized aloud. She grabbed the phone to call Harold but then hesitated. The bear hadn't approached by accident. Somehow, impossibly, she had returned to the place where her cub had received help. She was seeking assistance just as she had before. Emma squirmed in Lily's arms, pointing insistently. "Help, bear! Help, bear!" Lily set her daughter down and knelt to look her in the eyes. "Emma, sweetie, I need you to stay inside. The bear is hurt, and Mommy needs to help her, but you must stay here where it's safe." Emma's lower lip trembled. "Emma, help. Help too." "Not this time, baby," Lily said firmly. "This is different. The bear is bigger and might be scared because she's hurt." As if understanding their conversation, the bear had stopped at the tree line, swaying slightly. She made no move to come closer, but neither did she retreat into the forest. She was waiting. Lily quickly gathered her medical supplies, stronger now than what she'd had that summer day, as she'd stocked a proper veterinary clinic since then. She put on her heavy coat, then hesitated again. Approaching an injured adult bear alone was beyond foolish, it was potentially deadly. She reached for the phone again, this time dialing Harold's number. He answered on the second ring. "Harold, it's Lily. The mother bear is back, the one from this summer. She's injured, bleeding badly from her side. I think she came here for help." Harold's response was immediate. "Don't approach her. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Call Daniel too, we might need backup." Lily hung up and dialed Daniel next, quickly explaining the situation. He promised to come immediately. But as she set the phone down and looked back through the window, Lily's breath caught in her throat. The bear had collapsed into the snow, her massive body creating a dark mound against the white backdrop. Red spread beneath her, staining the pristine surface. "She won't last 20 minutes, Lily murmured, torn between professional caution and compassionate instinct. A small hand tugged at her coat. Emma had retrieved her little red boots and was attempting to put them on. "Help bear now," she insisted, her young face set with determination that mirrored her mother's. Lily made a decision that went against every wildlife management protocol she'd ever learned. She knelt and helped Emma with her boots, then bundled her daughter in her warmest coat, hat, and mittens. "We'll help her together," she told Emma. "But you must stay right beside me and do exactly as I say. Promise?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Promise." Together, they stepped out into the snowy morning. The cold air bit at their faces as they carefully made their way toward the fallen bear. Lily carried her medical kit in one hand and held Emma's tiny mitten with the other. As they approached, the bear raised her massive head, dark eyes finding them immediately. There was no aggression in her gaze, only pain and something else. Recognition. She made a soft huffing sound, the same one she had made that summer day when saying goodbye to Emma. Lily stopped at what she judged to be a safe distance, setting down her medical kit and lifting Emma into her arms. "Remember her," she whispered to her daughter. "She remembers you." Emma nodded, reaching out a mittened hand toward the bear. "Friend." "Bear hurt." The bear's injuries were worse than Lily had initially thought. A deep gash ran along her right flank, the telltale sign of a poacher's trap. Though hunting bears was illegal in this forest, the wound had partially closed but had reopened, possibly during her journey to find help. Blood continued to seep into the snow, and Lily could see signs of infection setting in. "She needs more than field treatment," Lily said, mostly to herself. "This requires antibiotics, proper cleaning, possibly surgery." Emma squirmed to be put down. Reluctantly, Lily set her daughter in the snow but kept a firm grip on her coat. To her surprise, Emma didn't try to approach the bear. Instead, she bent down and began to gather snow in her small hands, packing it into a lumpy ball. "What are you doing, sweetie?" Lily asked. Emma didn't answer. With careful steps, she moved slightly closer to the bear and placed the snowball near the wounded area, then backed away to her mother's side. "Cold make better," Emma explained simply. Lily's eyes widened in realization. Of course, she's trying to reduce the swelling and numb the pain. The instinctive wisdom of her daughter never ceased to amaze her. The bear watched this interaction with alert eyes. When Emma backed away, the massive animal shifted slightly, bringing her injured side closer to where the snowball had been placed, a clear invitation. Lily heard the crunch of tires on the snow-covered driveway. Harold had arrived, followed closely by Daniel's police SUV. They approached cautiously, taking in the scene with expressions of disbelief. "I told you not to come out here," Harold said in a low voice, though there was more concern than anger in his tone. "She wouldn't have survived the weight," Lily replied, not taking her eyes off the bear. "Look at her, Harold. She came here deliberately, seeking help, just like before." Daniel had his hand resting on his holstered weapon, but he made no move to draw it. "Is that snow on the wound?" he asked, noticing the small white mound near the bear's injury. "Emma's idea," Lily explained. "And the bear seems to understand, it's helping." As if to confirm this, the bear huffed again, her breath forming a cloud in the cold air. She remained still, watching the humans with an intelligence that defied conventional understanding of wild animals. Harold knelt in the snow beside Lily. "What's your assessment?" "Trap wound. Infected. Significant blood loss. She needs surgery to properly clean and close it, plus antibiotics." "You're talking about taking a wild bear in for treatment?" Daniel said, his voice laced with disbelief. "That's not just unorthodox, it's unheard of." "Everything about this bear is unheard of," Harold reminded him. "Remember this summer?" Emma, growing impatient with the adult conversation, prepared another snowball. Before Lily could stop her, she walked closer to the bear and placed it alongside the first. The bear made no threatening moves, just watched with those intelligent eyes. "So what's your plan?" Daniel asked, still tense but clearly affected by the unusual scene. Lily took a deep breath. "We need to transport her to my clinic, sedate her, treat the wound properly, give her time to recover before releasing her." Her. "And how exactly do you propose we move a 400-pound wild bear?" Daniel asked. "I have a tranquilizer in my truck," Harold said. "Wildlife management issue for emergencies." He looked at Lily. The dose would keep her under for about 2 hours, enough time to move her and start treatment. Lily nodded, then looked down at Emma, who was watching the bear with unwavering attention. "Sweetie, can you tell your bear friend that we're going to help her, but first, she needs to take a special nap?" Emma nodded seriously and approached the bear again, this time close enough to touch her. Lily's heart leaped into her throat, but she restrained herself from pulling her daughter back. Some instinct told her this moment was important. "Bear take nap," Emma said clearly, placing her small hand on the bear's massive head. "Then all better. Promise." The bear made a low rumbling sound, almost like a purr. She blinked slowly at Emma, then laid her head down in the snow, as if understanding and accepting what was to come. Harold retrieved the tranquilizer gun from his truck. With practiced movements, he loaded the dart and took careful aim. "This will sting," he warned, though it wasn't clear whether he was speaking to the bear or to Emma. The dart found its mark, and the bear flinched slightly but made no aggressive move. Within minutes, her breathing slowed, and her eyes drifted closed. "I've never seen anything like it," Daniel murmured. "It's like she trusted us completely." "Not us," Harold corrected, nodding toward Emma. "Her." Together, the three adults managed to load the sedated bear onto a tarp and then into the back of Harold's truck. Emma insisted on riding along, keeping a protective eye on her friend bear. The strange procession made its way to Lily's clinic, where the real work would begin. News of the injured bear spread quickly through the small community. By afternoon, a small crowd had gathered outside Lily's clinic, not protesters or thrill-seekers, but concerned citizens bringing offers of help. Among them were Tyler, Ryan, and Jimmy, who immediately volunteered to assist. Inside, Lily worked diligently, cleaning the wound, removing damaged tissue, and closing the gash with careful stitches. Harold monitored the bear's vital signs while Daniel kept the growing crowd at a respectful distance. Emma sat on a stool in the corner, watching the procedure with solemn attention, occasionally offering words of encouragement to the unconscious animal. "Bear get better?" "Emma here," she reassured. As Lily worked, she discovered something embedded deep in the wound, a metal fragment from the trap that had injured the bear. It had prevented proper healing and caused the infection that had driven the animal to seek help. "Barbaric," Harold muttered, examining the jagged piece of metal. Illegal traps like this were supposed to have been cleared from the forest years ago. "Whoever set it is still out there," Daniel said grimly. "And they might set more." The surgery took nearly 3 hours. By the time Lily placed the final stitch, the bear should have awakened from the tranquilizer, yet she remained unconscious, her breathing shallow. "Her body is exhausted from fighting the infection," Lily explained to the concerned faces around her. "She needs time to recover." "How much time?" Daniel asked. Lily shook her head. "Days, possibly. She can't stay here that long. It's not safe, for her or for us. What if we built a temporary enclosure?" Ryan suggested suddenly. Something secure but comfortable, where she could recover before being released back into the wild? Tyler nodded eagerly. We've been helping build the rehabilitation enclosures. We could adapt one for a bear, reinforce it, make it larger. It would need to be extremely secure, Daniel cautioned. This isn't a fox or a raccoon, this is a full-grown black bear. We can do it, Jimmy insisted. We've learned a lot these past months. Harold considered this, then nodded slowly. I'll help, and I'll clear it with wildlife management. This is an exceptional case. As the adults discussed logistics, Emma had climbed onto a stool to be closer to the bear's head. With gentle movements, she stroked the coarse fur between the bear's ears, whispering words only she and the bear could hear. The next few days were a flurry of activity. The teenagers, with help from Harold, Daniel, and volunteers from town, constructed a spacious enclosure behind Lily's clinic. They used heavy timber and steel mesh, creating a sheltered area with a soft bed of straw and access to fresh water. The bear, meanwhile, remained in Lily's clinic, gradually regaining strength. Lily administered antibiotics and changed the dressings on the wound, marveling at how quickly the animal was healing despite the severity of the injury. Emma insisted on visiting the bear every day, sitting beside the makeshift bed where the massive animal rested. She would bring her picture books and read to the bear, turning pages and describing the illustrations in her limited vocabulary. On the third day, as Emma was in the middle of reading her favorite story about a lost duckling finding its mother, the bear finally opened her eyes. Emma didn't flinch or call out for her mother. She simply smiled and said, "Bear awake. Story working." The bear blinked slowly, taking in her surroundings with apparent calm. Her dark eyes focused on Emma, recognition clear in her gaze. She made no attempt to rise, seeming to understand she was being treated. When Lily entered the room moments later, she froze at the sight of the conscious bear so close to her daughter. But there was no tension in the air, no sense of danger, only the same inexplicable connection that had manifested that summer day in the clearing. "Well, hello there," Lily said softly, approaching with slow, deliberate movements. "Feeling better?" The bear watched her approach but remained relaxed. Lily checked the wound, finding it healing well with no signs of renewed infection. The bear tolerated this examination with remarkable patience. "She'll be ready for the enclosure tomorrow," Lily told Emma. "And in a week or so, she can go back to the forest." Emma's face fell. "Bear stay with Emma?" Lily knelt beside her daughter. "Sweetie, bears need to be free. They need forests and rivers and open spaces. She has a home out there, just like we have our home here." Emma considered this, her young mind grappling with concepts beyond her years. Finally, she nodded. "Bear visit Emma?" "Maybe," Lily said, not wanting to promise something so unlikely. "But even if she doesn't, you'll always be special friends." The bear made a soft huffing sound, as if confirming this sentiment. Emma giggled and patted the bear's nose gently. The following day, they carefully moved the bear to the outdoor enclosure. She walked on her own, though slowly, with Lily, Harold, and Daniel flanking her and ready to intervene if necessary. Emma led the way, occasionally looking back to ensure her friend bear was following. The next week passed peacefully. The bear regained strength daily, walking the perimeter of her enclosure with increasing vigor. Emma visited every day, often accompanied by the three teenagers, who had become as invested in the bear's recovery as anyone. Word of the extraordinary relationship between the child and the wild bear spread beyond their small town. A wildlife documentary team arrived, hoping to capture footage of this remarkable story. Environmental activists took interest, using the bear's injury to highlight the ongoing problem of illegal trapping. Local schools organized field trips to Lily's clinic, where students learned about wildlife conservation and the delicate balance between humans and nature. "You've started quite a movement," Harold told Lily one evening as they watched Emma sitting near the enclosure, drawing pictures that she would later hold up for the bear to see. "I didn't start anything," Lily replied. "Emma did. Or maybe the bear did that day she brought her cub to us. Either way, it's bigger than any of us now." On the day scheduled for the bear's release, a small crowd gathered at a respectful distance. The documentary team set up their cameras, and Daniel ensured everyone stayed behind the designated safety line. Lily opened the enclosure gate, then stepped back to give the bear space to emerge. But the bear didn't immediately leave. She stood at the threshold, looking out at the waiting forest, then back at the humans who had cared for her, particularly at Emma, who watched with a mix of happiness and sadness on her young face. "Go on," Harold encouraged gently. "Your forest is waiting." As if understanding his words, the bear finally stepped through the gate. She paused, then approached Emma, who stood protected between her mother and Harold. With infinite gentleness, the massive animal touched her nose to Emma's forehead, the same gesture of farewell she had offered months ago. Emma reached up and placed both hands on the bear's muzzle. "Bear, be safe," she said clearly. "Emma, remember always," the bear huffed softly, her breath warm against Emma's face. Then, with a final look at the assembled humans, she turned and lumbered toward the forest's edge. They watched until her dark shape disappeared among the trees, the silence broken only by the soft click of a camera shutter. "Will we ever see her again?" Ryan asked, voicing the question everyone was thinking. Harold shrugged. "Bears typically avoid human contact. Under normal circumstances, I'd say no. But nothing about this has been normal," Tyler pointed out. "True enough," Harold admitted. "In this case, who can say?" As the crowd dispersed and life gradually returned to a semblance of normality, the story of Emma and the bear became something of a local legend. The documentary aired nationally, bringing attention to both wildlife conservation efforts and Lily's rehabilitation center, which expanded with donations and grants. The three teenagers, having completed their community service hours many times over, continued to volunteer. Tyler eventually decided to study veterinary medicine, inspired by Lily's work. Ryan focused on wildlife management, while Jamie developed educational programs for schools about the ethical treatment of animals. Emma grew, as children do, but her special connection to the natural world remained. She showed an uncanny ability to approach wild animals without frightening them, a gentle touch that seemed to transcend the usual barriers between human and beast. Spring came again, bringing new life to the forest. Lily and Emma were in the garden behind their cabin, planting vegetables. Emma, now 2.5, chattered happily as she patted soil around a tomato seedling. A movement at the forest's edge caught Lily's attention. She straightened, shading her eyes against the afternoon sun. There, half hidden among the new green growth, stood the mother bear. She looked healthy and strong, her coat glossy in the dappled sunlight. But she wasn't alone. Beside her stood her cub, now nearly grown, and next to them, two small shapes tumbled in the grass, new cubs, born during the winter hibernation. "Emma," Lily said softly, pointing. "Look who's come to visit." Emma looked up, her small face lighting with recognition and joy. "Friend bear," she exclaimed. "Friend bear family." The mother bear huffed, the familiar sound carrying across the garden. She made no move to approach, simply standing there, as if introducing her new family to her human friends. Emma waved enthusiastically. "Hello, bear babies." "Hello." For several minutes, the bears remained at the forest's edge, a safe distance maintained between the two worlds. Then, with another soft huff, the mother bear turned and led her family back into the depths of the forest, where they belonged. "She came to show us her babies," Lily marveled. "To say thank you in her own way." Emma nodded sagely, as though this was exactly what she had expected. "Bears remember," she said simply. "Bears no friends." Lily picked up her daughter, holding her close as they watched the forest where their extraordinary friends had disappeared. "Yes," she agreed. "Some bonds transcend the boundaries we think exist between different worlds." And in the years that followed, through changing seasons and growing years, those bonds remained, a testament to the simple truth that a child too young to know fear had once revealed: compassion needs no translation, and kindness can bridge the wildest divides. 10 years passed. Emma grew from a toddler into a thoughtful, compassionate 12-year-old, with unusual wisdom in her bright blue eyes. The rehabilitation center flourished, becoming a renowned facility where injured wildlife from across the region received care. Lily had trained a staff of dedicated veterinarians and volunteers, many inspired by the story that had first put their small town on the map. The teenagers were long gone to college, Tyler pursuing veterinary medicine, Ryan studying wildlife management, and Jamie developing educational programs about conservation. They returned during summers to help and reminisce about the day that had changed all their lives. On the anniversary of that first encounter, Emma always went alone to the clearing where it had all begun. It was her private ritual, a moment to remember the connection that had shaped her life. Though the mother bear and her family hadn't been seen near the cabin in years, this year, as Emma sat in the dappled sunlight of the clearing, she felt, rather than heard, a presence behind her. She turned slowly, her heart suddenly racing. At the edge of the clearing stood an adult bear. Not the mother she remembered, but a younger one with a distinctive white patch of fur on its chest. It watched her with intelligent, curious eyes that seemed somehow familiar. "Is it you?" Emma whispered, hardly daring to believe. "The cub from back then?" The bear made a soft huffing sound, the same sound its mother had made all those years ago. It took a cautious step forward, then another, its movements deliberate and unthreatening. Emma remained still, feeling no fear, only a profound sense of recognition. The bear approached until it stood just feet away, close enough that Emma could see her own reflection in its dark eyes. For a long moment, they simply regarded each other. The girl who had once been a baby with no understanding of the boundaries between wild and tame, and the bear who had once been an injured cub, comforted by that baby's touch. Then, with infinite gentleness, the bear lowered its massive head and touched its nose to Emma's forehead, the exact gesture its mother had once used to say goodbye and thank you. Tears filled Emma's eyes as she reached up with trembling fingers to touch the bear's muzzle. "You remembered," she whispered. "After all this time, you remembered." The bear huffed again, its breath warm against her face. Then, it turned and lumbered back toward the forest edge. Before disappearing among the trees, it paused and looked back once more, as if cementing this moment in memory. Emma watched until the bear vanished from sight, the tears now flowing freely down her cheeks, not tears of sadness, but of profound joy and wonder. Some connections, she realized, transcended time and words, even species. Some bonds, when formed in perfect innocence, could never truly be broken. That night, as Emma sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, Lily joined her with 2 steaming mugs of hot chocolate. "You saw something in the clearing today," Lily said softly. It wasn't a question. Emma nodded, her eyes still bright with the memory. "The cub. Only, it's not a cub anymore. It came back, Mom. It remembered me." Lily wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Some people might say that's impossible. That wild animals don't form lasting bonds with humans. Don't remember faces years later. Some people build walls where there don't need to be any," Emma replied, with a wisdom beyond her years. "I never learned to see those walls. And neither did the bear." They sat in comfortable silence, sipping their hot chocolate as the forest settled into its nighttime rhythms, the hooting of owls, the rustle of nocturnal creatures, and, in the distance, the soft huffing call of a bear, carrying through the darkness like a message between worlds. "Do you think we'll see it again?" Lily asked finally. Emma smiled, a smile filled with certainty and peace. "Maybe not with our eyes," she said, placing a hand over her heart. "But in here, we'll always see each other. That's what the bear came to tell me today. That some connections never end, they just change form." High above, a shooting star traced a brilliant path across the night sky. Emma closed her eyes and made a wish, though, in her heart, she knew her greatest wish had already been granted. To know, beyond any doubt, that the boundaries we create between ourselves and the natural world are illusions. Illusions that dissolve in the presence of pure, unconditional love. And somewhere, deep in the forest, a bear with a white patch on its chest settled into its den, carrying the memory of a human child who had once reached out with compassion when others had shown only cruelty. 2 worlds, not so separate after all. Connected by the invisible thread of a moment shared in innocence, a thread that would continue to weave through their lives, binding them in ways that words could never fully express but the heart would always understand.